Hello and welcome to a Nevada Commission on Ethics training video. Today's topic is about the cooling off provisions that apply to public officers and employees when they depart public service. I'm Executive Director Ross Armstrong, and I'll be walking you through the presentation today. The Nevada Ethics Law has specific cooling off provisions within Chapter 281A of the Nevada Revised Statutes. Two main things to remember about the cooling off parts of the ethics law is that it creates restrictions on you if you leave public service, and that it's for a 1-year time frame. So let's talk about the restrictions after you leave public service. That's when you're going from public service to the private sector. It doesn't cover restrictions in going from one public agency to another. And that 1-year time frame is based on the year that you depart service. The Nevada cooling off prohibitions really have two different types of prohibitions. The first is that it restricts who you can work for, and the second is that it restricts what activities you can do no matter who you work for. So we'll talk about each of those separately. In terms of who you can go work for, you cannot seek or accept employment with certain entities, and depending on where you work currently, that may change who you can go work for. So for all public officers and employees within the state of Nevada, so state agency, city, county, any other government subdivision within the state of Nevada, you cannot go work for the vendor of the agency. There are certain requirements, right? That the contract value has to be greater than $25,000. The contract has to be awarded within a year prior to your departing your public agency, and your position had to have some sort of influence, or your position is allowed to have some sort of influence over the awarding of that contract. Again, that applies to all agencies. The second type of prohibition is just for state executive branch officers or employees, and that is that if your agency regulates a business or entity, right, you adopt regulations that somehow regulate a business or entity, you cannot go work for one of those regulated business or entities. If your job currently, while you're at the public agency, includes policy and regulations, if you have audit, investigation, or other powers similar to that of the industry based on your role, and if you possess trade secrets based on your role, right? So if any of those three things exists, you cannot go work for a regulated business or industry. The Public Utilities Commission and the Gaming Control Board and Commission have special requirements. As you can see, if you work for the Public Utilities Commission, you cannot go work for a public utility. That includes parent companies and subsidiaries. So you can't just narrowly figure out the technical name of the utility that is currently regulated by the Public Utilities Commission. It can include parent companies and subsidiaries. And then for the Gaming Control Board, you cannot go work for a person who holds a gaming license, and you cannot go work for someone who's registered, who is required to register by the commission. Remember that the Nevada cooling off provisions apply for 1 year. So once that 1-year time period has expired at the termination of your public service, then this prohibition on who you can go work for is lifted. In addition, the Nevada Commission on Ethics has the ability under the law to grant relief from the strict restrictions of the ethics law. And in order to do that, the individual has to submit an advisory opinion request. At that point, the commission will take a look at the facts and interact with the individual to get a better idea. And what they really have to make sure is that if they're going to grant relief, it can't be contrary to the best interest of the public, it can't be contrary to the continued ethical integrity of the agency, and it can't be contrary to any of the other provisions of the ethics law. So often when the commission gets one of these questions about whether it should grant relief, we'll want to know why it's in the best interest of the public for this individual to be able to go from a public agency to one of those prohibited private agencies. And we'll want to know a little bit more about the ethical integrity and the interaction between that public entity and the private entity. So that covers the prohibitions on who you can go work for. Now let's talk about the activities that you're prohibited from doing under the cooling off provisions. The ethics law says that you cannot counsel or lobby your former agency if you're being compensated for that counsel or lobby, and if the item that you're being paid to lobby on is a matter under your consideration during your service. So let's say that you're in charge of purchasing for your agency, and you're working on an RFP to award a contract prior to your retirement, but you retire before that RFP process is complete. You can't then go work for one of the applicants for that RFP and be paid to help them win that RFP before your old agency. If you do that, then that becomes an ethics violation. If you think about it, one of the main reasons we have the cooling off provision is to prevent public employees from acting at the end of their term of public service in a way, in some sort of exchange for future employment, or to use their special insider knowledge to then make a profit for a private entity. And so that is why, no matter who you work for, these specific prohibitions apply under the ethics law. Again, that restriction is only for 1 year after your termination of public service. So some tips for compliance with the cooling off provisions of the Nevada ethics law. First is to remember that the prohibition includes seeking employment, not just obtaining employment. So you want to be cautious about any meetings or conversations you have that might lead to potential employment with a prohibited employer. Because the vendor prohibition applies to all public officers and employees, it's really important to be aware of who the vendors are of your agency. The Nevada Commission on Ethics has published a cooling off resource guide. It's on the resource tab of our website. And so that is a great resource if you're preparing to depart from public service and enter the private sector. It goes into some more detail about the different items we've talked about today and provides the actual statutory references so you can go look those up. Now, the fourth tip for compliance is to consult with legal counsel. All Nevada Commission on Ethics opinions, advisory and complaint opinions are available online. And so if you talk to legal counsel, they can take the facts of your particular case, compare them to previous rulings of the commission, and give you really solid advice about what you need to do to maintain compliance with the ethics law. And then finally, if any of those other tips aren't helpful, then you can always request an advisory opinion from the commission. We have that request on our website. Again, you'll need to request an advisory opinion if you're seeking relief from the strict application of the law. But the advisory opinion process takes about 45 days. And throughout that process, our commission staff will work with you to understand all the important facts of your situation and provide you with specific direction on who you can and cannot go work for and what activities you can do as you depart public service. So we hope that this video has been helpful to you as you seek to understand the Nevada ethics law better. Feel free to visit our website. We have lots of resources there, ethics.nv.gov. You can also follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn as we provide updates and educational reminders throughout the year on all sorts of topics for the Nevada Commission on Ethics. And you can always email us, ncoe@ethics.nv.gov, or give us a call at 775-687-5469.